So, good evening, everyone. My name is Gustavo Alexandria, right? Sorry, foi mal, eu tô ouvindo o português saindo, eu tenho que sair, né? Eu tenho que colocar no. Só um
Isso.
minutinho, eu tenho que
Clica
colocar no áudio
no
principal.
áudio original. Isso.
The original. Okay, good. All right, so I am an interpreter and translator as well, and also I'm a law graduate, right? And translation and interpretation happen in my life. This is basically a short introduction, okay, for you to get to know me a little bit better. So at first, I was planning on having a civil servant job. You know, I wanted to, as we commonly say in Portuguese, we say concurso, right? I wanted to, and of course, I was born in Brasília, so naturally, I was bound to take tests, public tests, to be a civil servant, considering that all my family is a civil servant as well. So, at first, I went into law and I graduated, and after that, I applied. I mean, I took a lot of concursos and I went into a lot of these selection processes for civil servants, but it didn't happen for me. I couldn't pass the ones that I wanted to be in. So after a while, I decided to, I mean, I started teaching English ever since I got back from England. As a 17-year-old, I went to an exchange in Cambridge, England, and I stayed there for 6 months. After that, I came back to Brazil, and I was super excited about being able to speak English fluently. I know that I might be speaking a little bit too fast, but it's usually how we speak English, right? So that's my regular pace of speaking. So, and that's the idea. So I went to Cambridge, I came back to Brazil, and then I started teaching English as as a second language in English schools around Brasília so I could make some money. Back then, I had a small allowance from my mom and my parents. And of course, I was 18 years old. I couldn't work a lot. So, and I was studying for vestibular as well, entrance examination. So all through this process, I made money teaching English, and I also had a small allowance from my parents. And after that, I went into law. I graduated. I took a lot of public tests, and I couldn't pass the ones that I wanted to. So after that, I continued teaching English, and I said, you know what? Since I'm doing this part-time, why don't I do it full-time? So I went into English teaching full-time. And so I started having a lot of students. I remember that there was a point in time in which I had around 45 different students, but not just private students. I had students also in groups, for example, in companies such as Banco Bras. You probably heard it's a tourism company here from Brasília, Banco Bras, right? And I had many classes there, many groups of students that wanted to learn English. I had a lot of private students as well, and I also taught English in for Brazilian teachers at the International School of Brazil in Portuguese, Escola Internacional, Escola das Nações, sorry, actually, the School of Nations of Brasilia. That's the correct name, and so I taught a lot. I spent a lot of years teaching English. That is one of my passions. I love speaking English and learning different languages, foreign languages. And after that, there was a student of mine that was the commercial manager in the School of the Nations. And he asked me, Gustavo, why don't you try to interpret for the School of the Nations meeting? And I asked, and what's the topic about? And it says it's education or pedagogy. And I said, okay, great. So, and is it consecutive or simultaneous? And he said, oh, I think it's easy. Don't worry about it. So I went there, and that was my first job. It was my first job with a very professional colleague that I have. Her name is Shanta Walker. She's an American citizen, but she speaks perfect Portuguese as well. She has been living in Brazil for many decades. So after that, I started in getting into the interpretation. That was it way back in 2015. And after that, I interpreted little by little. I got to know a lot more people, a lot of different companies. And it was very exciting, and it still is exciting. It's never easy, you know, like if people tell you that interpretation is an easy job, either they're lying or they do a lousy job, because you have to be able to understand a lot of different topics, and even topics that you are not fluent in your own language. So as you can see, of course, I'm fluent, and all of my other colleagues are fluent as well in English. But even in Portuguese, we don't understand a lot of the terminology of the meetings that we go to, especially, for example, military, the one that I was just doing recently with Raquel. It was like there were some days that it was really tough, you know. It was wow. We know how hard we had to work. It was really mind-boggling sometimes, but it worked. In the end, we did a very good job. And that's basically the introduction of how I went into interpreting, okay? All right, now I think that, what else can I say? As I said before, I'm a law graduate, so I really like to study law-related topics. And I believe that these English law interpretation or legal interpretation is pretty tricky because it involves different topics. Sorry, guys. And then that's basically it. You know, that was an introduction of my how I went into interpretation. And so today let me see, I have to keep track of time here. 7:10, right? So today I'm going to talk to you about a little bit of legal English, but it's not real legal English. It's just a few words, and I'm going to read some extracts from a code of conduct and ethics of that I translated for a law firm a few days ago, and it was really, really tricky because it was definitely, it's never easy, you know, especially if you're a perfectionist. And I'm a kind of a perfectionist, but I do know that you have to be careful not to get bogged down in with a few words. You have to be careful about not spending too much time because clients need the work to be done within the deadline that you set for them, you know, and sometimes it's kind of complicated to match to do your work before the deadline, all right? So let me start reading here. Some things that I found interesting in the translation of the manual. As you can probably see, my face now is a little bit lighter because I'm looking at my Word now, the document. So basically, I'm going to explain how a code of conduct and ethics works. Okay, what are the structure? What's the framework of a conduct and ethics? Of course, I'm not going to go into specifics because there's a secret. It's not the secret information or anything, but it's something I don't want to mention the company that I did the job for, and because I'm supposed to not disclose the information. But basically, this is a very typical code of conduct, and this company is a big company here in Brazil. It's an engineering company, I believe, and it has to do with software as well. It's in both fields of work. Okay, so the first thing that a code of conduct has to have is the message from the president. And as you can see, by the way, guys, I'm speaking in a standard North American English, right? And that's how I usually speak English. I was trained this way, even though I lived in England for a while when I was a teenager. As soon as I got back to Brazil, I had to like relearn because I wanted to speak with a standard Northern American accent. Okay, so message from the president. I'm gonna read a little bit of the message from the president. Since its founding, this company has been committed to having a leading position in the engineering and software market. With the collaboration of highly trained and committed employees, we work hard to understand our clients' needs and deliver customized, humane, and valuable solutions. By the way, just a pause here. I'm reading this stuff, so I'm not going to read it really fast because I know that it's super hard to interpret anything when people are reading it. So, besides this constant search for results, we have always operated and have been guided by values such as integrity and ethics. We understand the importance of joint action between public and private organizations in the fight against corruption. No wonder we are recognized as a reference by several companies in the sector and by the government itself. So that was just a little extract of the first part of the Code of Conduct, and it's the part where the president or the CEO or the person, like the chairman, addresses the workers in a company, the employees. By the way, guys, something interesting that I want to mention to you here, and it was a question that I had when translating this document. In Portuguese, we usually say colaboradores, right? Colaboradores. And a lot of Brazilian companies are not using the words empregados or funcionários anymore because they want to give the impression that you are part of the work. You're not just a regular employee or a worker, right? So there is another word in English that some companies are using, but I decided not to use this word here in this code of conduct, especially because it has legal implications, right? And the word in English that is equivalent to the word colaborador in Portuguese is associates. But there is a very clear and distinct difference between associates and employees. And the problem is when you blur the lines between the two distinctions, these two terms, it's kind of confusing, and I'd rather not do this. So it was a choice of mine as a translator and as a professional that has a law degree. I decided, I don't know, I don't think it's a good idea to mix these terms, so I didn't use the word associates. I only used associates when people are actually associated and they're not really workers from the company or employees from the company. All right, and that's it. So that is the first part of the Code of Conduct, which is the message from the president. Now we're going to move on to the second part, the introduction. I'm going to read a little bit about it, okay, so you can have an idea. This company is nationally recognized as a company that allies business results with appreciation for each employee, a factor that has contributed to becoming a winning company. We have won important awards and certifications since 2011. We have ISO, in Portuguese ISO, right? ISO 9001 certification, a fact that is an evidence of our quality standard and environmental management. Recently, in the year 2021, we were ranked the best company to work for in Brazil, in the category of medium-sized national companies. As far as integrity and ethics are concerned, it is worth mentioning that we have received for 4 consecutive years the Pro Ethics Award from the Office of the Controller General, in Portuguese, Controladoria Geral da União, CGU in Portuguese, which shows the public recognition of the effectiveness of our compliance. So this is just a little part, just one extract of the introduction as well. Now we're going to move on to other parts of the code. Now there is a part called our company, and that talks about the structure of the company, okay? So I'll read it now. This company, okay, remember that I'm not going to say the company's name, I'll just use the word this company. This company. The name, this company, comes from Latin and it means root or origin. We entered the market in April 2010 and have a multidisciplinary team of managers and consultants. With more than 30 years of experience in engineering, automation and industrial IT, and software development projects. We are a Brazilian multinational technology and engineering company capable of crossing borders, and we operate in all continents. We offer highly qualified, technologically independent services and solutions to meet the needs of the Brazilian and global markets. So after the description of the company, there is a section that says the mission of the company, and the mission is, our mission is to transform technical scientific knowledge into results. After the mission, there is another paragraph with the vision. To be the top-of-mind provider of technological solutions for complex problems. Then the next paragraph is about values. Long-term relationship, agility, ethics, challenge, innovation, focus on people, and commitment. These are the values. So I think that now we can skip to another part here. They bring some fun facts about Brazil and the current situation of Brazil. Okay, so they have a paragraph with a question. Did you know? And then the answer. Brazil currently ranks 96 in the world concerning the perception of corruption. According to data from Transparency International, which evaluates corruption in the public sector of 180 countries, Brazil obtained in 2021 38 points in the Corruption Perception Index out of a total of 100 points. This performance put the country once again below the global average, 43 points, the Latin American average, the BRICS average, and even further behind the G20 countries. So I'm going to comment on this topic here. I think it's pretty interesting, and we can discuss this later maybe. This is you probably have heard of Transparency International, right? It is a Berlin-based institution that analyzes countries from around the world, and they rank countries according to the level of transparency of the public accounts and public expenditure. So it's a very interesting way to encourage transparency and honesty in all democratic countries and even the not democratic ones, okay? So it says here that Brazil, that's a really sad thing, by the way, okay, that Brazil is the 96 in the world concerning perception of corruption, and it's behind almost every Latin American country. But it's a reality that we have to deal with, and I believe that I'm very optimistic, okay? I'm realistic, optimistic in reality. I know that Brazil in my lifetime is probably never going to be in a developed country or an advanced economy, but I'm sure that we are making progress because I'm part of the generation that is helping to make this progress, right? And I believe that everyone here is also part of it. So now I'm going to skip this part and I am going to talk about compliance, okay? This is the part that I meant at the beginning that I'm going to explain. So the part is our compliance department. So there is an explanation in this paragraph of what compliance means. And the question is, what is compliance? The answer, compliance is an English word meaning to act in accordance with or to conform to. Thus, whenever we use this term, we are referring to compliance with laws, notably the anti-corruption law, codes, policies, procedures, and manuals governing ethical behavior and integrity within this company. So what I think it's interesting here, guys, especially some of you that are translators as well. I know that a few of you, I have already talked to some of you, and you do translate as well. By the way, yes, any translation work, you can recommend me, okay? I translate English, Portuguese, and Spanish now. And anyway, that's the word compliance is something that you can translate. But unfortunately, I mean, not unfortunately, but as it is, as the situation is right now, English is such an overwhelming, such overwhelming influence in other languages around the world that many languages around the world are adopting the English words themselves and they don't even bother translating anymore. So compliance is one of them. You don't say there is a word in Portuguese for compliance. Yes, there is. There is the word conformidade. Conformidade can also be translated as compliance, but most companies nowadays, and even official institutions, government institutions, decided not to translate the word anymore because compliance is such a universal term now. It is super common and it is like a buzzword nowadays. Everybody talks about compliance. Everybody tries to explain to other people what compliance is. And it's really important to know what it is. And now it's basically a word that in Portuguese, whenever I say the word compliance in Portuguese, I just change my intonation and the phonetic system that I use. I say compliance. Compliance, basically, in Portuguese, with my Portuguese pronunciation, right? So that's something super important. And every company nowadays needs a department, a compliance department, and especially if they are companies that are very big, because they can have very serious legal repercussions, right? And they need to, they deal with governments and they deal with customers that are other multinationals. And these companies are super demanding. They are really, really demanding when it comes to knowing what are the values, the mission, if the company is an honest company, if there is a department, a compliance department, okay? So they say here, what is a compliance program? The explanation is, in this sense, the compliance program is the set of measures taken to ensure a culture of integrity in this company's internal and external corporate environments. This code, our policies, manuals, and booklets are parts of a large system that seeks constant improvement. Okay? Okay, some more comments. Keep in mind that this code that I'm reading here in English is a translation of a code that exists first in Portuguese, right? So I'm translating it and I'm trying to find the best words, the best options for each word. So there are some structures that are very similar to Portuguese, but as translators, you probably see that you have to make choices. And sometimes if you change the structure of the original sentence, the client will not be very satisfied with your work. So you have to, I try to translate and to make it as reliable as possible to the original sentence. But at the same time, whenever there is a structure in Portuguese that is not very natural, I always change it, because after all, this is a code in English, right? It's not meant to be read by Brazilians in English. It's meant to be read by native speakers of English or people who speak English as a fluent language, okay? So continuing here, they mention 4 pillars of the code. The 4 pillars, and they're pretty easy, okay, pretty simple. I'm gonna read here now. Our compliance program is underpinned by 4 fundamental pillars. 1. Instruction and training. This company values the production of materials with clear, objective, and accessible language, and the continuous training and raising of awareness of its employees. Communication and marketing strategies are fundamental for ideas to be promoted efficiently and for widespread acceptance of its compliance training. Second pillar, prevention. Preventive action is very important. Top management plays an essential role in the adoption, implementation, and promotion of ethical conduct, which must be observed by all Radix employees and third parties who have a relationship with it. Training, rules establishing punishment for violators and integrity channels are tools used to prevent irregularities from happening. After all, it is always better to be safe than sorry. Okay, another comment here. This last sentence, it is always better to be safe than sorry, is something a bit informal, but if you read the code of ethics of this company, you will see that they don't use a very formal language. You know, they don't want it to be a super formal document. They want it to be a document that is also relatable. That has language that people understand, that people will identify with, right? So basically, the language used here in the document goes between formal language, which is the obvious choice, and also it uses some informal It makes informal choices. And that's why I chose this sentence here. In Portuguese, there was a sentence that was kind of informal as well. And I chose this sentence here to represent the idea. And it perfectly represents the original idea in Portuguese, okay? So, which is an informal sentence, so people can understand the actual idea, the point itself, right? So I'm just reading a bit of some extracts, okay, from the code. And I didn't want to show you the text, so it's not too easy for you guys, because then it's just basically sight translation, right? You probably know this expression. Sight translation is what we do when we basically read a text, okay, which is a bit different from the technique that we use when we are interpreting a spoken presentation, okay? So another topic is monitoring and detection. So this company is concerned about constantly monitoring its activities and detecting illegal or unethical conduct that are present in its business environment, which allows for the prompt adoption of measures to contain damages, preserve evidence, and investigate the facts. And the last pillar is response. There is no tolerance for conduct that does not conform to our compliance program. This company will deal with violations with due rigor and, if necessary, will enforce appropriate disciplinary measures against employees and may terminate the contract with the respective business partner. Okay, let me see the time here. Just want to make sure I'm not going to miss the deadline. Okay, good. So there are other parts of this code of conduct. And one of them is the protagonists, or the people, the most important people that have key roles in the institution. Okay, so I'm just going to mention a few of them. The first one that I have here is top management. Okay, and there is also the ethics committee. These are the two key parts in this process of the compliance to make the company comply with laws and comply with regulations, and to be a company that is regarded and admired by consumers and clients because it follows compliance policy and it is an ethical company. Okay. By the way, guys, something interesting. There is also, when I was translating this document, I had, of course, to study a lot. You know, like even though I'm a law graduate and I have a lot of background in legal English, it's not that you can see that there isn't a lot of legal English here. It's, for example, as a translator, you have to find out what standard of code of conduct and ethics is used nowadays, and to model your code of conduct on these models, these documents that are available on the internet. So one of the things that I did when translating this document was to download Coca-Cola Code of Conduct and Ethics and other major international companies that have a policy of transparency, of ethical behavior, and they have values and follow these values, right? So, and each company has a specific model, has a specific way to write and create their code of conduct and ethics. So there is no universal model for you to follow, but at least there are many that you can use these documents as templates for you to translate also. You can use some ideas, you can give some suggestions to the people writing the code. And in my case, I could not provide any suggestion because the code was already finished when I got it, right? So I was not helping create it in Portuguese. I was basically translating into English. But it's like creating, and it is, for example, nowadays I'm studying at a university, and I'm on a postgraduate course now of translation English-Portuguese. And my professors at the course, they say that when you translate, you basically create a document. You know, you create an original document, and that's the idea. When you're creating a document, you have some freedom. You just have to be careful about not going over the boundaries that you have, or else you will be changing completely the original message. Ok? Tá bom, gente. Então acho que vocês cansaram, né, de me ouvir em inglês aí, né? Quase meia hora. E eu estou olhando aqui o tempo também, para não ficar muito cansativo. E é isso. Então, eu posso comentar mais um pouquinho sobre esse código de conduta e outras de ética, né, que eu fiz. Mas eu acho que o essencial eu expliquei, né? E uma das coisas que eu queria mencionar agora em português, só para quase terminando, né, assim, sobre o assunto, para depois a gente abrir para perguntas e respostas, é a questão do canal de integridade. Eu achei fantástica essa ideia. Eu estou lendo em inglês, tá? Porque eu esqueci de abrir o documento em português, mas obviamente que eu sei decorado já o português. O canal de integridade, achei ótimo isso. E ele fala assim: o que é um canal de integridade? É um canal de comunicação interno e externo dessa empresa que é focado na área de compliance. E como eu falei com vocês, a gente não usa a palavra, a maioria das empresas hoje em dia usa a palavra compliance, né, como se diz em português, em vez de dizer conformidade ou outras traduções que são aceitas também para essa área. Isso daí vocês vão ver ao longo dos eventos e também de quem fizer a tradução de documentos, tradução escrita, vocês vão perceber que é bem comum agora, é quase que universal. E a Raquel mesmo sabe disso, a gente tem um monte de palavras que a gente só repete no português, a gente não precisa traduzir, porque elas já são aceitas em português, o termo em inglês já é aceito em português, e você nem precisa se dar o trabalho. Por exemplo, vou contar uma experiência minha de um evento de seminário de defesa cibernética. Já tem alguns 5 anos, mais ou menos, que eu faço esse seminário. É um seminário do Centro de Inteligência de Guerra Eletrônica do Exército. E esse seminário, obviamente, tem 1 milhão de palavras técnicas. É uma loucura. Eu não sou um especialista em internet. Eu sou um usuário avançado de computador, no sentido de que eu entendo bem. Mas eu nem de longe sou um programador. Então tem muita coisa que eu tive que aprender ao longo do curso lá, né? Porque eles vão falar em português e eu vou ter que interpretar para o inglês. Então tem muitas palavras como algumas até se traduzem como cavalo de Troia, né? Trojan horse, né? Mas outras não. Você usa a própria palavra do inglês, como worm, né? Que eu falei em inglês, mas era para ser em português. Eu adapto a fonética do português. Worm, né? Ou malware, que é malware em inglês, né? Então, é muito interessante vocês perceberem esse aspecto de que, muitas vezes, especialmente quem lida com o inglês, que os intérpretes de inglês, é muito interessante ver que a gente não vai precisar interpretar certas palavras, porque elas já são de uso corrente aqui no português, no Brasil. A gente usa, comumente, você só muda a sua fonética, né? Quando você vai falar ela, normalmente muda a fonética, né? Para adaptar, para que a pessoa entenda. E é uma das dicas que eu dou sempre para quem está começando a interpretar. Eu estudo fonética há mais ou menos 20 anos, eu gosto muito do assunto, eu acho fantástico. Eles falam outras línguas também, né? Então, nenhuma de forma fluente, mas por exemplo, quando eu falo qualquer palavra em inglês, eu uso a fonética do português. Então, eu digo, por exemplo, se eu estou no evento e o palestrante falou Washington, D.C., eu vou dizer Washington, D.C., ou o Distrito de Colômbia, né? Então eu presto bastante atenção também na pronúncia e eu adapto para a fonética do português, para ser mais fácil, porque o nosso objetivo é fazer com que o público entenda o que a gente está falando da melhor forma possível, usando o nosso próprio sistema fonético, né? Então eu evito palavras do inglês, ou seja, eu evito falar anglicismos com a pronúncia do inglês. Eu falo anglicismos com a pronúncia do português, tá bom? Então, olha, já está chegando a quase 7h40, eu não quero ultrapassar, porque senão não vai ter tempo para pergunta e resposta, né? Já está ok, Raquel? Tudo bem?
Tá sim. Uhum.
Ufa, toma uma água aqui.
Tranquilo, ótimo. Gente.